right, my name is Mike Cornforth. I'm the coordinator for Indivisible Port Townsend, and welcome to our all-member meeting for September. What I'd like to do first is introduce our representative to Congress from the 6th District, the Honorable Derek Kilmer.
So I was asked to kind of give an update, and I'm going to confess that that's hard for me to do with a smile on my face, because honestly, I'm upset about the lack of progress that has been made, because I have a lot of people in our district that I'm engaging on a daily basis, probably you are too, that are really hurting right now. You can go back to May 15th. May 15th is when the House passed the HEROES Act to provide additional coronavirus relief. And at that time, Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans said, rather than engaging on that bill, that in his words, we should just pause. And unfortunately, in the now nearly 4 months since, we've seen some real realities, and that is, municipal workers haven't seen their pink slips pause. Folks who are facing evictions aren't getting a pause. Small businesses there in Jefferson County who are just trying to keep the lights on aren't getting a pause. Probably the most outrageous difference between what the House Democrats have proposed and what Senate Republicans have proposed, to me, is on issues of basic economic security, including utilities and food insecurity. In the House bill, we included $67 billion for food, water, and utility assistance. And Leader McConnell provided $250,000 for food. That wasn't a typo. I didn't misstate that. You cannot meet the nutrition needs in Jefferson County for the amount that they've put forward for food assistance, that the Senate Republicans have put forward for food assistance. It's just wrong. And if I seem aggravated by it, it's because I'm actually aggravated by it, because we're talking to people who are really hurting right now. We've done calls over recent weeks with food banks that are stretched to the breaking point. And we're talking, listen, when someone gets laid off and they call our office, we're not sending them a form letter, I'm calling them. And people are really hurting right now. And the assistance provided in the Senate bill is just grossly inadequate. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, there are other things, and I'm happy to go into more detail if folks want to, but I know I've already talked longer than you wanted me to. Perhaps equally troubling is, as we work to try to save lives, as we work to try to save livelihoods, the other important thing is to save the life of our democracy. And that means protecting the Postal Service, protecting the census, and protecting voting. And the HEROES Act provided $25 billion to the Postal Service. In fact, I was back in DC a couple weeks ago. We voted on a bill specifically to try to unwind the damage done by the Postmaster General, not just to prevent him from doing more damage, but to unwind the damage already done and to provide funding to the Postal Service. And again, I want to arm you with information. The amount that we put into that bill was not some liberal wish list by us as Democrats. It was the amount that the bipartisan Board of Governors of the Postal Service said was needed. All of whom, by the way, are appointees of Donald Trump. So it is money that the Postal Service has said it needs to remain solvent and to continue to provide the level of service needed. And listen, we know people are already feeling the impacts of the erosion of the Postal Service's delivery standards. I've spoken with, and in fact, we did a Facebook Live on my Facebook page with a coffee shop in Port Townsend that had seen delays in delivery. And he said for the first time in the history of doing business, they are experiencing delays. I talked to a veteran who is seeing delays in the delivery of prescription drugs. And we know we're about to come up on an election where more Americans than ever are going to vote by mail. And we need to make sure that the integrity of postal delivery is protected. And I can't say the Senate bill does nothing on that. What it says is the money that was provided in the CARES Act doesn't need to be reimbursed, but it provides no new resources to help the Postal Service get through this difficult time. It does nothing in terms of protecting voting. In the HEROES Act, there was, I want to say, $3.6 billion that was specifically for enabling jurisdictions to move to vote by mail and to offer longer periods of time for those that do in-person voting, so that you don't have a bunch of people, as you saw in Wisconsin and Kentucky and elsewhere, people standing in Georgia, people standing in line for hours and hours and hours in the middle of a global pandemic. We don't want people to do that. And so having more access to voting, more days of voting for those areas that have not gone entirely to vote by mail is important. It costs money, and that was included in the HEROES Act, bupkis in the Senate bill. So if maybe I'll end there. I just want to give you that to give you a lay of the land on where things are. And, I've heard, and you see this every day on cable news, people say, gosh, why can't Democrats and Republicans, just get to an agreement on a COVID response bill? Well, that involves having a COVID response bill that actually solves problems that we're seeing in our communities. And it requires bargaining in good faith. It is not good faith to offer a $1 trillion proposal. And while Democrats were at, I think, $3.4 trillion on the HEROES Act, Democrats went down $1 trillion and Senate Republicans went down $500 billion rather than trying to meet somewhere in the middle. And I saw one of the president's advisors saying, well, why can't Democrats and Republicans just meet somewhere in the middle? I'm not sure he's talking to his negotiators because that's not what they are doing. And unfortunately, people continue to hurt, families continue to struggle, and action is needed now more than ever. I was on a call with Senator Cantwell and the governor earlier today. And listen, this is existential for the state, for state and local. This is a really big deal. I just got off a call with the president of the University of Washington. They've been told to prepare a 15% cut to the university's budget. Every community college in the state has been told to prepare a similar level of cut. There will be countless lost jobs as a consequence of that. Not to mention the impact to students and to their families. So I will tell you, our senators are on board. What I can encourage you to do is, if you have friends who live in other parts of the country and may be represented by someone who doesn't share your values, make sure you're weighing in with them. If you have got friends who live in other states, make sure they're reaching out to their senators as well. I will tell you, my mom went through her Christmas card list and has been literally reaching out to friends all over the country to say, call your senators, because people are hurting. And we cannot have more inaction. I think is it Maddow wrote What Can Be Done to Remove Louis DeJoy from the Postal Service. I agree with you. Frankly, I think he's shown himself to be entirely unfit for the job, not to mention the fact it appears, if the reports are accurate, he's violated multiple federal election laws by directing his former employees to donate to Republican candidates. So I think the Government Oversight Committee has said that they intend to do oversight hearing based on that latest and greatest information. Beyond that, we're about 2 months away from opportunity to remove all members of the Trump administration from office.
As you noted in your opening remarks, in this time of crisis, many people do not have food on the table, and some are being kicked out of their homes. And I, too, am afraid that it will get worse before it gets better. I know Congress approved 2021 budget in July, which included a 20.2 increase in military spending, more than was even requested. I also know that you did not vote for the amendment to redirect 10% of military spending to domestic programs in our nation's hardest hit communities. Would you have a change of heart in regard to reducing military spending in favor of pressing humanitarian needs? And do you think we have misplaced priorities? Thank you for being here.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for the question too. So let me, agree with the initial premise of your question, which is I actually do think we should cut wasteful defense spending. And, on one hand, there are threats in this world and having a strong military is important, but I also believe that strengthening our national security is more than simply about defense investments. A secure nation is one that educates its kids. And a secure nation is one that takes care of sick citizens and seniors. And a secure nation addresses inequities and injustices in society. And a secure nation is one that also makes smart investments in foreign assistance, like international aid, that frankly this administration has consistently put in the crosshairs. Because not every problem can be solved by a bomb and a tank. So here's the problem. The amendment that you referenced proposed a 10% across the board cut to programs that were funded by the National Defense Authorization Act. And while I think we can be smart about cutting programs even within the Defense Department, the problem with implementing a cut across the board is that it included cuts to programs that I don't support cutting 10% across the board. So for example, that amendment would cut a couple $100 million, actually more than that, from military housing programs. And having spoken to far too many service members who are living in substandard housing, that's a real problem. It would cut literally massive amounts of money, hundreds of millions of dollars out of education programs at a time when ensuring that all kids, including those in military families, can get educational resources. I think that's really problematic. It would cut nearly $1 billion from nuclear cleanup activities, which, in a state that has Hanford, I don't want to see a delay to that work to remediate the waste cleanup at Hanford. Unfortunately, in our district, in Kitsap County, there was identified PFAS chemicals at Naval Base Kitsap. Unfortunately, had that amendment passed, it would have included a 10% cut to the cleanup of PFAS chemicals. It would have included a 10% cut to suicide prevention programs for service members. It would have included a 10% cut to seismic upgrades at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. And for those of you in Port Townsend, it would have included a 10% cut in the noise mitigation funding that I fought really hard to get into that bill to deal with the military jet noise. And so, while I think we can agree that a federal budget needs to strike a better balance between defense and non-defense spending, I also think we need to be strategic about it. And that cuts should be made to bloated or outdated or unnecessary programs that aren't consistent with our values and that don't serve the needs of the folks I represent. But there's a difference between doing that strategically and just doing it across the board. And that's why not just a majority of Congress, but a majority of Democrats opposed that amendment.
Maybe you can take a look at Julia Cochran's and Joe Tiffany's.
So Julia says, bring attention to the plight of the unsheltered who have even less places to go indoors than before. And given the state of our air today, that emergency is today, as well as days that are 50 degrees or below due to the threat of hypothermia. Thank you. So Julia, thank you. Again, we had housing insecurity issues even before COVID. We're about 10 million housing units short in our country. And, I'm a sponsor of a bill that tries to deal with the supply problem so we have more affordable housing, to significantly put the low-income housing tax credit on steroids. The House passed a bill that would build nearly 2 million additional low-income housing units nationwide. I supported that, and I think it would be a great step forward. on top of that, we know one of the best ways to address homelessness is to keep people from becoming homeless in the first place. And so I'm the lead sponsor. I'm actually one of the lead sponsors on a bill to provide emergency rental assistance to the tune of $200 billion of emergency rental assistance. The value of that is it means that people can pay their rent and not face eviction. It also means that landlords aren't at risk of losing their properties either because they have financial commitments as well. That proposal was included in the HEROES Act and unfortunately is not included in the Senate Republicans' proposal. One of the priorities, Julia, I've also worked on is to increase funding for, and not just as a COVID response, but beyond that, is for many of the programs that support homeless Americans through HUD, through the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We have been consistently at loggerheads with the Trump administration as we try to increase funding for those for those programs. They've tried to either eliminate or cut those programs, including things like the Community Development Block Grant Program, which is flexible funding that in counties like Jefferson County can really make the difference in terms of providing support to the folks that you wrote about, Julia. So thank you for the question. Let's see, Joe Tiffany asked, does Congress have a plan for removing Trump if he refuses to go, even if he loses? I don't, if there's a plan for removing him, if there's an explicit plan, I have not seen it. There's been a lot of discussion about it. Including, thinking through what it means in terms of just electoral strategy. If there is, for example, an electoral college tie, or if there is a contested election and it moves to the House of Representatives, it doesn't go to a vote of the House by member, it goes to a vote of the House by state delegation. So that, that obviously changes some of the strategy in terms of trying to pick up not just seats, but pick up states in case Trump tries to contest the election. But I appreciate you raising the issue, and I share the concern. Jeff Fong said, I appreciate the fact that you're laser focused on solving the problems versus proposing solutions. Most difficult problems aren't solved because the problem hasn't been defined clearly and people jump immediately to solutions. Thanks for the wisdom. Thanks, Jeff. Frankly, we need to do both. Obviously, one of the concerns I have, particularly as we look at the COVID response, is, our starting point was what are the problems that need solving, and then let's make sure that resources are being provided appropriately. And that is a fundamentally different approach than what you've seen from Mitch McConnell, who seems to have started with, how do I keep my number under $500 billion? That's not solving the problem for the folks that I represent. And, there's, as I mentioned, a lot of need out there that would simply not be met if Mitch McConnell had his way. I also, let's see, Debbie said, I follow you since your first election. I've never seen you so low. I just want to say we're going to change the Senate and President. Our object is to get our people to vote, vote, vote. Debbie, I'm not low. I'm just, what I would say is this does highlight the importance of elections. This election is going to be the most consequential of our lifetime. And you look at what's been able to pass because the House has been in Democratic hands. And I want to quickly, Mike, if I have a couple more minutes, can I take 2 more minutes? I see you wanting to give me the hook. Okay, I'm going to keep it to 2 minutes. The bills that the House Democrats have passed that have been dead on arrival in Mitch McConnell's Senate would fundamentally change the direction of our country for the better. When you're in the majority, the first 9 bills, every bill gets a number. The first 9 bills are set for the majority's priorities. I'm going to quickly run through HR 1 through 9 because I want you to see what a difference they would make. HR 1 is a big democracy reform bill to reduce the role of money in politics, to provide new ethics rules, not just for the executive branch, but also for the legislative branch, and to end partisan gerrymandering so that voters choose their elected officials rather than elected officials choosing their voters. H.R. 2 is a big infrastructure bill that includes funding for roads and bridges, but also for things like rural broadband and affordable housing and school construction, and acknowledges that we shouldn't just, when we invest in infrastructure, we should also invest in good union jobs. H.R. 3 is a bill called the Lower Drug Costs Now Act to lower the price of prescription drugs, and it saves so much money that it enables us to expand Medicare to cover vision, hearing, and dental. H.R. 4 is a new Voting Rights Act to address the Shelby County versus Holder decision and put the teeth back into the Voting Rights Act. H.R. 5 is a bill called the Equality Act that says people should not face discrimination in matters of housing, employment, or anything else based on who they are or who they love. LGBT non-discrimination. H.R. 6 is the Dream and Promise Act to remove the specter of deportation from dreamers that are living in fear under this president, who came here through no choice of their own, through no fault of their own, and are living in fear of deportation. H.R. 7 is the Paycheck Fairness Act that embraces a very simple principle of equal pay for equal work, trying to address pay inequities that face women in this country. H.R. 8 is universal background checks for the purchase of a weapon. I got to tell you, I can't count how many moments of silence there have been since I've been in Congress. I can tell you how many moments of action there have been. There were zero until Democrats took the majority, and now we've been able to pass H.R. 8 for universal background checks. Got to pass it in the Senate. And H.R. 9 is called Climate Action Now, to have the U.S. re-enter the Paris Climate Agreement and commit the federal government to meeting serious goals for carbon reduction, because climate change is real and it requires big, bold action. All of those bills I was proud to support. All of those bills are stuck on Mitch McConnell's desk. So Debbie, I'm not down, but I'm really hella motivated to see us flip the Senate and get a new president so those great bills can become great laws and make a real difference on behalf of the American people.
Thank you, Derek Kilmer. And thank you for joining us in our monthly meeting. It was very informative and in some respects inspirational.
I appreciate getting to have you by my side. So thanks everybody. And thanks to Indivisible. I really appreciate if we could clone all of you and spread you all throughout my district, I'd be really grateful for that. So.